Hello, good morning to everyone. So let's have our daily briefing for today. And just a quick market recap on yesterday's data. Okay, so first things we have the employment change for New Zealand dollar for the second quarter. So the previous data was 0.6% and forecasted at 0.7%. And for the actual data, it was 1%. Followed by the unemployment rate for New Zealand dollar as well for the second quarter. So the previous data was 4.6% and forecasted at 4.5%. And for the actual data, it was 4%. So obviously, the employment data for New Zealand dollar was actually good comparing on the previous one for the second quarter. That is why the pair made a significant move yesterday. And as you can see here on the 30 minutes time frame, the New Zealand dollar was actually up for 70 pips. So from 0.7010 all the way to 0.7080. Meanwhile, we also have the retail sales for Australia, monthly basis for the month of June. So the previous and forecasted was 1.8 or negative 1.8%. And for the actual data, it was negative 1.8%. So still unchanged for the monthly basis for the month of June. And also we have the retail sales for Euro as well, yearly basis for the month of June. So the previous data was 8.6% and forecasted at 4.5%. And for the actual data, it was 5%. So for Aussie data and Euro data, it did not create any significant move right after the release. And next one is one of the key data last night, which is the ADP for US. So the previous data was 680K and forecasted at 695K. And right here, this one was actually a shocker for all the traders because if we base the stats on some macroeconomics calendar, the ADP was actually expected to be around 700K. But it turns out that for the month of July, it was 330K. So way lower comparing on the forecasted and the previous one. So that is why the US made some crazy move, or the US dollar made some crazy move yesterday. And also the underrated data last night it's the ISM Services PMI for US as well for the month of July. So the previous data was 60.1 and forecasted at 60.4. And the actual data was 64.1. So the US ISM Services PMI, they've tallied a record high of 64.1. And this one was actually, it's never been touched for a couple of years. So the last time they've had 64 was actually very recent on the month of June this year. And they've recorded a high of 64.1 once again for the month of July. So let's take a look on what happened on some currency pairs right after the US data last night. Right here, this one is the dollar index on the 30 minutes time frame. So this is what happened right after the ADP data. So it went down from 92.10 level all the way to 91.80. So the ADP data for the dollar index, it went down for 27 pips. But right after the ISM data, it made a significant move, obviously, around here. So from this level all the way here, so it went up for 40 pips last night. And also the dollar yen on the 30 minutes time frame made a significant move on the ADP data for 36 pips, and the ISM Services PMI last night for about 78 or roughly 80 pips for this pair. And also for the euro dollar on the 30 minutes time frame, right after the ADP, it benefited from that data for almost 45 pips. But however, on the ISM data, went down once again for about 50 pips or 52.4 pips. And also the pound against the US dollar, right here, did not create any much on the ADP data, but for the ISM, went down sharply for about 40 pips. And last one is gold. So you can see here on the ADP data, it benefited the gold as well. So it went up for almost 140 pips, but it went back on the downside all the way here, almost 200 pips, or almost 220 pips right here. So it made a significant move on some currency pairs. So that is why a lot of traders were shocked on the data for the US. So it's been a crazy data for US last night. And for today's economic data, during the Asian session, we have the trade balance for Australia, monthly basis for the month of June. So the previous data was 9.681 million and forecasted at 10.450 million. And the release time earlier, 9:30 a.m. And for the actual data, it was 10.496 million. So it beats the market estimated data, but however, did not create any significant move after the release. And during the European session, our main highlight for today's economic data is the interest rate decision for Bank of England or for UK, followed by the speech for Andrew Bailey later at 7:30. And for the US session, we can look for weekly initial jobless claims for US later at 8:30 p.m. And for our key product for today, we have the GBP against the US dollar. So right here, a lot of experts or analysts, they are expected to be, or the interest rate decision for the GBP against the dollar is still expected to be at 0.10%, still unchanged at 0.10%. But however, there's a lot of factors that can affect the interest rate decision for this pair because they made some significant news the past few weeks or the past a couple of months ago. And one of the catalysts, I must say, for this pair, number one is the inflation rate. So if we're going to base on the statistics for the GBP USD, their inflation rate on the yearly basis was 2.5%. So they meet their expectations for about 2%. And some says that it's currently on its peak level. So since they meet the target of 2%, so the most likely for the couple of months or next inflation rate, it may go down as well. And the second one is the GDP or the GDP data or the growth data for UK. So if you can still remember, the GDP data for UK failed to meet the expectation for the past 2 months. So that's one of the catalysts as well. And the last thing is the COVID or the COVID infections for the UK. So if you can still remember, the first week of July, they've lifted the restrictions on what they call the Freedom Day on the UK. But right after they lifted the restrictions in some parts of the countries or some parts of the cities, the COVID cases were dropping in the UK, which is a sign of economic growth. But based on stats, even though they've lifted the restrictions, the death tolls are still rising for UK. So overall, the elements of surprise is also possible for this one, just like the Aussie data, just like the Aussie data this week. So even though they are currently on the lockdown, the interest rate decision goes up. So same goes for the British pound on the against the US dollar. So we have to be cautious with this one as well. But for today's support, we can look for 1.3862 and 1.3838, and the resistance 1.3935 and 1.3982. Again, for the European session, later at 7 p.m., we have the interest rate decision for UK. And 30 minutes after that, we have the Governor Andrew Bailey's speech. And for the US session, we have the weekly initial jobless claims. So again, if you're going to trade all currencies that is paired by the GBP, you have to put proper risk management and be cautious as well. All right, so thank you everyone for joining our daily briefing. Please stay safe and have a great day.